Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich describes a strategy of using aid to pull Gaza's population to the southern border, from where they can be removed from the Strip altogether. Now, if true, this could amount to ethnic cleansing, and Smotrich says it will be done in the framework of President Trump's plans. Muhammad Shehada is a political analyst and writer from Gaza, currently working at the European Council of Foreign Relations in Copenhagen. I spoke to him this afternoon about how his loved ones back home are surviving under siege. But first, he reacted to the Israeli government's explicit plan to use aid to remove Palestinians from the territory.
I've been in detailed conversations with a number of Palestinians on the ground in Gaza, colleagues and family and friends, as well as with UN officials and European diplomats over the last 2 weeks. Every single person I spoke to looked at this idea with complete horror. They describe it as sinister, dystopian, and extremely dangerous. It is basically a bait, a tool of blackmail, a tool of just institutionalizing the starvation that Israel has been inflicting on Gaza for the last 20 months, and a tool for forcible expulsion, where Israel would tell people, if you want food, come to Rafah, otherwise you will starve to death. This is the most dangerous we've been until now in terms of a sinister exploitation of aid for the sake of war crimes and crimes against humanity, the top of which is genocide.
Smotrich's justification is, of course, preventing aid getting into the hands of Hamas. Is that valid?
It's absolutely lunatic and completely disingenuous. The UN says that if you want to prevent looting in Gaza, the answer is not to reduce people's food to the least of the least, as Smotrich put it, the very minimum of the very minimum, because that scarcity is what incentivizes looting in the first place. When a bag of wheat flour in Gaza right now costs 2,500 shekels, almost $700, that's when you would give people incentive to loot those bags because it pays off. But when you flood Gaza with aid, when prices go back to normal, and when humanitarian organizations are able to deliver these packages for free, there's basically no incentive for looting. It is Israel's genocide that incentivizes the looting, not Hamas or other groups in Gaza.
How are people surviving at the moment? It's been months under siege, starvation is on the rise, and then there is this additional issue of this massive security vacuum. How are your family and friends in Gaza surviving?
Well, there's suffering, there's catastrophe, there's dystopia, and then there is Gaza. Gaza is beyond words. I cannot even start to describe how it is. So I was talking to a close friend yesterday. He said he stored some wheat flour during the ceasefire that he's going through now. It's full of maggots, it's full of bugs, it's rotten, but that's the only thing that he can feed his family at the moment. Another colleague of mine, Nada, a breastfeeding mother, she said she's collapsing all the time. She's passing out, and she sees people on the street when they go out every morning. They start going at 5 in the morning until sunset, scraping and desperately looking for food. And people are passing out on the street as well. Hospitals became overwhelmed with malnourished and severely starved Gazans, especially children, that when another colleague of mine went to take her mother to a hospital for urgent medical treatment, the hospital turned her back. They said, we have to ration the medicines, we have to ration our resources and food we have at the moment at the staff. So we prioritize children and we prioritize people wounded by Israeli airstrikes who need immediate life-saving surgery. So she had to take her mother home and watch her die. Nada, my colleague, the breastfeeding mother, she wrote me a message recently, early on, in which she said, Muhammad, I cannot breastfeed anymore. There's no water. There's barely salty water. I'm afraid my son's gonna die. And she was asking for practical advice. She was not being polemic. She said, how do I stay sane when he dies before my eyes? How do I keep my mind together? That was the main advice she was asking for. Another friend of mine, his sister, saw her entire family killed in one airstrike. She has 6 kids. Her husband was kidnapped or disappeared because he was working at a hospital. She doesn't know anything about him, and she basically has gone insane. Her brother is saying that her cognitive functions have deteriorated significantly out of being abandoned in this situation. And the most heartbreaking of all those sceneries that we're seeing from Gaza are basically kids with amputated limbs, that have become orphans, lone survivors of families that were completely extinguished by Israel, that are standing in these infinite lines begging for scraps of food, and there's no one to take care of them, and there's no shelter for them to be at. So there is, as I said, there is horror, there is dystopia, and then there is Gaza. It's beyond anything that can be described in words. And with all of these unfolding, undescribable tragedies, you have Israel carpet bombing them every single day. It's like one of these most horror sci-fi movies from the future. You have drones that are armed to shoot to kill or to bomb people to smithereens, that are literally hovering on top of your head, that literally in the evening you would see a drone approaching the tent area with a flashlight and opening it, inspecting people, choosing who to kill and who to spare. And in that entire atmosphere, you have every single day Israeli decision makers coming and saying, our enemies are the entire population there, with no way to run away from it.
Now, with these horrifying realities, the aid blockade has provoked some of the fiercest condemnation yet from the international community about Israel's actions in Gaza. Commentators and governments who previously defended Israel have, for the first time, used terms such as genocide, such as war crimes. Is this backlash reaching people in Gaza? Does it provide any hope?
I was talking to a close friend yesterday or the day before, and he brought it up himself. He said the statements that were issued by those 22 European countries, the other statement, I think, by Canada, France, and the United Kingdom, and these recent diplomatic steps are giving them some hope out of despair, out of complete desperation. They're clinging to any hope they can find. And they see that, okay, there is some renewed momentum after Gaza had disappeared for a very long time. Headlines have been for months and months only about Trump, and nothing about the genocide that's unfolding. There was this deliberate effort to relegate it to the bottom of the news. And now it is coming back to prominence again. But at the same time, there's this settled feeling that all those statements, all those media rhetorics and gymnastics are just empty words, and that the world has made a decision to abandon Gaza to its fate, where Israel is now tightening the screws more and more and more and more on the people that are still there, for them to either perish, languish and die, or try anything possible to escape. So I think like the rhetorics that came out of Europe over the last couple of days were encouraging. They were a good first step. They were remarkable compared to their performance earlier, but it's still incredibly short of anything remote to what is needed to live up to this genocidal moment.
Another international community reaction I want your view on is that of UN groups that have refused to comply with Israel's new proposals for aid. Also on this program, I speak to UNICEF about this decision. But of course, with so few other alternatives to get food, I wonder how people in Gaza feel about this decision by humanitarian groups not to comply.
Every single person I spoke to in Gaza said one has to be completely insane, out of their minds, to step a foot in those heavily militarized concentration camps that Israel is setting up in Rafah, where you have to pass through numerous checkpoints with Israeli genocidal soldiers teeming around it, waiting to ambush whoever they want. And you have to pass through facial recognition technology, fingerprinting, different layers of screening and vetting with undisclosed criteria. And at the end of it, you have to literally walk from Beit Hanun, 41 kilometers to Rafah, to pick up a package that would weigh 20 to 40 kilos, and then 41 kilometers back under constant bombardment, thinking that you will make it back alive. Nobody in Gaza thinks that if you step a foot in those compounds, you will make it back home alive on your feet. Either you will be killed on the way, you will be kidnapped by the Israeli soldiers, you will be blackmailed into collaborating with Israel, or the food that you would get would be looted on the way. But then there is the other element of it that people are afraid about, the forcible expulsion. That all those hubs are established. 3 of them are established in Rafah. One of them is to be established to the south of the Netzarim corridor, where Israel would tell people the only way you can get food, leave your home, leave northern Gaza, and move to the borders with Egypt for the final phase of the genocide to be implemented, where Israel would push them a few hundred meters further into Egypt, into the Sinai desert. Then there is the other element of basically using this as an ultimate tool of dictating who lives and who dies, because it's only 60% of Gaza that would receive this aid, according to the organization itself, according to Israel itself, only 60%, which means Israel would pick and choose who gets aid and who dies. It is like dystopian by every metric you choose. You're wielding it as a weapon to further the genocide, to debilitate the entire population, collectively punish them while pretending to allow any food in, but you're practically not.
It sounds like there's a pretty clear picture in your head of what this aid plan by Israel ultimately tells us about the war. There are, of course, countless competing accounts seeking to explain or justify the violence in Gaza. Netanyahu calls it a war of self-defense for the sake of Israeli survival. Some of his critics say that it's his personal bid to cling onto political power. What do you say? What does this aid plan tell us about Netanyahu's government's intentions in Gaza?
Well, Netanyahu, there's a common talking point for analysts where they say that Netanyahu is afraid of ending the war because that would be the end of his political career, or his government would collapse, or Smotrich and Ben Gvir would leave government. I think this is a fig leaf. The main interest of Netanyahu, it is Netanyahu that wants to see this happen. It is not the far-right coalition. He is the far-right. And he wants to see it happen because the Israeli government now sees a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to finish what they say, what Ben Gurion failed to accomplish, what Ben Gurion failed to complete, which is expelling the entire Palestinian population between the river and the sea. At least if you expel the ones in Gaza, that is the demo, the pilot project for the others that would follow in the West Bank as well. And Netanyahu is not that much concerned with the collapse of the government as much as he's literally concerned with reshaping his legacy after the October 7 failure to be the Israeli leader that expanded Israel's borders, that managed to finish the job, to finish off the Gaza question. And that is the main concern. So it is a campaign that where Israel would continue to bomb and pound and starve Gaza indefinitely to collapse and break the will of people there so that they would choose to leave even if Israel doesn't force them on trucks, that as soon as the borders are open, the overwhelming majority of Gazans would be sort of engineered into wanting to leave this area. And that is the basic goal.
Muhammad Shehada, thank you for your time.